folks, KGM might be a brand that you're not overly familiar with. Formerly known as SsangYong, it's undergone a bit of a rebrand. Now SsangYong have got a bit of a pedigree in things like four-wheel drive pickup trucks, and they've tried to bring some of that pedigree along into the consumer market, and this is the Torres, their latest SUV, and it's a big one. It comes with a 1.5 litre petrol direct injection turbo engine. It's got an ACIN automatic gearbox. ACIN are one of Japan's finest manufacturers of automatic gearboxes as it goes. 161 brake horsepower, 0 to 60 times 10.8 seconds, and about 33 mpg on WLTP figures. Not amazing, is it, the WLTP figure, but let's have a look later on in the review and see if that actually holds up. Now there are two trim levels available. You've got the K30, which comes with 18-inch wheels, and that's front wheel drive only. Then you've got the L40, which is the higher spec trim. You've got options on that for front wheel drive or all-wheel drive, and that comes with things like 20-inch wheels, electric adjustable leather seats, intelligent adaptive cruise, powered tailgate, the list goes on. This one is the L40 that I've got here today. Pricing on the base trim starts at about 35 and they go up to about £40,000. Now that 1.5 litre petrol engine is not the beefiest thing for a car of this size. You do still get fairly respectable towing capacity of 1.5 tonnes. Now the styling's quite big and bold and rugged on this. You've got sort of interesting things here, and then when we move round to the back, you'll find there's a suggestion of a spare wheel, but obviously it's not there. But randomly, you've got the big handle over here, so you think the boot's going to open that way, and actually it opens this way. The boot space itself is huge at just over 700 litres, and KGM proudly states that it's class leading. Certainly I can't think of anything with a bigger standard size boot than that. And once you get the back seats down, you've got plenty of room. It basically turns it into a van. There's also a little bit of underfloor storage there, but not mountains of it. So the front cabin, initial impressions are okay. There's some interesting materials. We've got this sort of copper pattern material up here, contrasted with some darker materials and this sort of fake chromey stuff. Got some stitching up here, or faux stitching at least. So they've made a little bit of an effort. The material quality's not the best, I would say. Some of the materials don't feel like they're going to last forever. We've got a nice cubby there, a really well thought out little place to stash your mobile phone, and it's got the wireless charging built into it. Double cup holder, a little place to keep the key, I guess. That's what I'm using it for anyway. Then we've got a couple of USB-Cs down here, as well as a 12-volt socket. A huge hazard warning light button. One of the only buttons in here, actually. It's incredibly sparse when it comes to buttons, but a huge hazard warning light button. I think that's great, because in a lot of cars now, you have to hunt around for the hazard lights. And obviously, if something does happen, you want it to be immediately apparent where that is, because you might quickly need to bang it to warn people behind of an incident. The infotainment screen, you've got two 12-inch screens here. This one's infotainment, this one's obviously your driver information. And, the screen's a wee bit laggy. The software's not the best with it. You do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but they are wired and not wireless. But the worst thing with this is the aircon controls, because if you're in Apple CarPlay or Android Auto and you want to change the temperature, you have to come out of it, go into the menu to find the aircon controls, and then find your way back to Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And what's more, the voice command button doesn't do anything. Not in this one anyway. It could be a fault with this particular model. Maybe it's not available in this particular model, but for whatever reason, that voice command button is doing nothing for me. It could be user error, mind. As for the menu system itself, it's okay. It's not the best out there. It's just okay. Driver information display, see also just okay. It feels a little bit cheap. Like, I don't know what it is about it. The quality of the pitch is good enough. It's just about bright enough, but just some of the graphics and the way it works are just a little bit meh. Like, I've got the passenger door open at the moment because that's where the camera's sitting, and the little graphic that comes up to show that, it just looks awful. It looks like something from an Atari ST or something. You know, it looks really low res. And a couple of those little things just take away from what could be actually quite a decent system. Another minor annoyance with it is, let's say when you leave the car, you've been on Bluetooth music. When you get back into the car, it returns to the radio. And those kind of things are just a bit frustrating. This one's got a host of driver assistance features. They are quite intrusive, and you do have to turn them off every time you get in the car if you don't want to have the benefit of using them. Obviously, plenty of people do like to have them on. But aside from that, it's all okay. Like, it's got the functionality you want and need. It just takes a little bit of work to get there. Steering wheel's quite nice. It's very large, but quite thin. I would perhaps prefer a slightly chunkier wheel. And it does actually have a decent selection of buttons and rockers and things, and they're not haptics, you know, they are sort of physical buttons and rockers. So that's all good. It's got a flat bottom on this one as well, which helps because it's so huge. The driving position's slightly odd. You feel like you're sitting on the car rather than in the car. It's very tall. If you like a high driving position, you are going to absolutely love this. And you've got a huge front windscreen, but where the rear view mirror sits does sort of cut into your view a little bit. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it feels slightly out of whack. The rear view is pretty decent. From the back, you've got a reasonable size screen, but when you go to the rear quarters, they're blocked off by those big sort of silvery, chromy styling things. This one does have a reversing camera. Picture quality's okay, no problems with that. But the angle that the camera's at is a little bit odd. It feels like it's really pointed down, and it's fine, it still does the job. But if a person was standing behind you, for example, you'd probably see sort of their bottom of their knees and their shins and their shoes. So yeah, it just feels a bit odd. Can't quite put my finger on it, but the angle of it is a little bit odd. And in summary, I'd say it's quite a comfortable place. It's really spacious, but there are one or two little frustrations. So in the back, it's quite a happy story. There's loads of headroom. I'm about 5'9" and a bit, and there's about that much headroom. So you'd be really happy in the back here at well over 6 foot. We've got some sun blinds that clip on there and then disappear again. Electric windows, heated seats in this top spec one. And we've also got 2 USB-Cs down here. Nice pocket there to put some stuff in, and a central armrest with a couple of cup holders. The quality of the leather feels good. The seats are a wee bit bench-like. You don't get a great deal of support in these rear seats, but I don't feel like it's too much of an issue, especially as you could sit 3 adults across the back here in relative comfort. Very spacious, very open, a little bit dark because we have got a dark headliner in here and there's no sunroof or glass roof. But aside from that, quite a nice place to sit. So what's this thing like on the road? Well, meh is the way I'd probably best sum it up. Where do I start? So the steering's very light, like very light, and that's fine, but you will find the car's also quite fidgety. I don't know if that's because of the 20-inch wheels on it or the way the suspension's set up, but it is very fidgety, and you do feel a lot of imperfections in the road. And you will find yourself, even here, I'm on a reasonably smooth road, and I'm feeling quite a lot of bumps, and I'm having to make quite a lot of fine adjustments to the steering, more so than I would expect for a car like this on this kind of surface, if I'm completely honest. Also, the gearbox is a tiny bit dim-witted, but that could be down to the fact that the engine's only putting out 161 horsepower, and this is a big car. You'll just find it a little bit hesitant to pull away, and the way the gear controller, the gear selector, sorry, is set up is a little bit counterintuitive. So when you're in park, to go into reversal drive, you just move it into reversal drive with one click. If you're in reverse and then you want to go into drive, you've got to click it down twice. And the amount of times you end up doing it once and you're sat in neutral, particularly if you're trying to get into a car parking space in a busy car park, it's just a little bit of a frustration. I think it should either be 2 clicks all the time or 1 click all the time. First world problems, folks, but it's something that's just a day-to-day frustration, which is probably why you're watching this video, to find out about the stuff that happens in the real world, not just look at a page full of numbers. Now, in the intro, I mentioned the slightly less than impressive 33 mpg figure for this car, and the good news is you can actually achieve that. You'll get late 20s, early 30s around town, and the better news is on a run it's possible to get this thing up to 50. You're probably more likely going to be in the late 40s on a long run, but you know, it's not too shabby when you consider the size of the car. The car's a wee bit boaty in the corners, but you really are going to expect that in something of this size. And I don't know, it sort of somehow feels a bit agricultural. That's actually not the right word. It feels more commercial. This has got some of the characteristics of driving a pickup, and you know, the SsangYong Musso is one of my favourite pickups available on the market. I think it's a great piece of kit, and this doesn't feel massively different to that, but the difference is that's designed for commercial use and this is designed to be a passenger vehicle. So in that respect, I don't think it quite hits the mark. Probably its most natural rival is not even an SUV really, it's probably the Subaru Outback, because that's a car with not amazing driving characteristics, reasonably low power, CVT gearbox which is a bit meh, but is massively practical and capable, and I feel this is sort of in that category. For everyday town driving it's completely fine, but you could do better. When we review cars, we typically look at the infotainment system, we look at the styling of the car, we look at the efficiency, we look at the performance, the handling, the ride quality, the comfort. In all those areas, it's at best average, and at worst, well below average. Maybe I'm being overly harsh because, you know, I was really looking forward to this vehicle. I've been looking out for it for a long time, since the first sort of renderings of it appeared. I thought, wow, that thing looks interesting, that looks cool. And it had so much promise. And I think if they'd worked a little bit more on the ride quality, given it a bit more power, set that gearbox up to have a tiny bit more urgency, and perhaps spent a bit more time honing the infotainment system, it could have been a really, really good vehicle, because it's so big, it's so spacious. You know, it's a great platform for a good sort of big family SUV that you could also use for DIY jobs and all that kind of stuff. As it is, it just feels like in some areas we've got a little bit of a half measure, which is a great shame. I'm actually going to be spending some time with the electric version of this car next week, and I'm wondering if some of the issues that this one's got are actually going to be solved by it being an EV. Now, lots of EV haters out there will be scoffing at the very words. However, when you think about it, probably the 3 biggest issues with this car are the way it handles, the way it rides, and the way it performs. Well, we're not going to have any performance issues because we're essentially removing the gearbox and replacing the fairly lackluster engine with electric motors. The weight's going to go into the bottom of the car, so perhaps it won't feel quite so top heavy. So if on paper this looks like a potentially good vehicle for you and your family, but you're put off by a lot of the things you've heard in this review, maybe just consider having a look at the battery electric version. I'm not saying it's going to be better, I haven't driven it yet, but sort of common sense suggests it might deal with a few of the issues that we've found here. It's worth noting that the car comes with a 100,000 mile 5-year warranty, which is very competitive, and KGM's quite an attractive service plan, which gives you the first 3 services for the car, the first MOT and 2 years extended RAC breakdown cover. However, I have to say overall, it's a little bit of a letdown in my eyes. It's hugely spacious, Like the cabin's got plenty of room, the boot's huge, you can fit everything you're ever going to want to fit into this car. But the pricing puts it up against some real stiff competition. Things like the Nissan X-Trail are within this sort of budget, and also the Skoda Kodiaq, which is a very capable car. The drivetrain could also be a little bit better. I feel like it could do with a bit more power. The gearbox is not urgent enough, but that's possibly down to the fact that it hasn't got quite so much power going through it as you might expect for what is quite a heavy vehicle. So those things do let it down a bit. I'll be taking a look at the electric version of this car over on my channel soon, and I don't know, possibly that one will fare a bit better. Generally, it's a nice car. Like, there's nothing that I hate about the car. It's just it does have a number of frustrations, and some of those frustrations don't exist with the competition. Thanks for watching this one, folks. If you'd like to watch some more Men & Motors goodness, go and check out what my mate Tom's been up to over there. Or is it over there? I'm never quite sure.